here is the taxonomic description of an oyster. Oysters are marine bivalve mollusks in the family Ostreidae. So here is the concise taxonomic overview. So the kingdom is Animalia, the phylum is Mollusca. So it's soft-boiled animal, mainly with calcium carbonate shell. The class is Bivalva. Bivalvia is a two-part hinge shell. The order is Ostreidae, which is a bivalve with similar characteristics. The family is Ostreidae, which is the oyster, which is a true oyster with irregular shaped shell. And the genera is Ostrea, Castoria, and others, such as Ostrea adolis, Castor Ostrea virginica, Castor Ostrea gigas, Castor Ostrea angulax. So this is the habitat of the oyster, as you can see here, which is habitat of oyster mostly at marine or brackish environment, which is it attached to substrate like rock and other shell, and also forming reef.
Hi, okay, let's move on to characteristic of oyster. I got 4 points to explain. First, morphology. In morphology, I will describe what structure and adductor muscle of oyster. The structure of oyster is asymmetrical shells and it can be white, grey, brown and greenish color. Oyster also have adductor muscle inside their shell, which they use to open and close their shell. When the oyster is open, this muscle leave a scars on the inside of the shell. For the side. Okay, secondly, mode of nutrition. Oyster consume food through filters, which they filter out of the water using their gills. They receive nutrients from this process. Thirdly, I'm going to describe the general characteristic of oyster, which habitat. Coastal and estuarine environment are home to oyster, which cling to rocks, piers, and other hard surface. Lastly, I will share about unique characteristic of oyster. Some oyster can form a beautiful pearl. This happens when an erosion gets stuck inside the shell, like a sand grain. Pearl oyster, or known as Ostreidae, are different from edible oyster, which known as family Ostreidae. Means that no oyster can form a beautiful pearl. Okay, that's all for characteristic of oyster. Okay, let's move to next slide. I'm here going to present about life cycle of oyster. Do you know the reproduction of oyster? Either it is reproduced by asexual or sexual. For your information, oyster is reproducing by sexual reproduction, and typically oysters start as males and may become females as they grow older. Let me explain their life cycle. First, oyster will release their gametes, which is sperm and eggs, into the water column. This process known as a broadcast spawning. Secondly, fertilization will occur in the water column where sperm from male oyster encounter eggs from female oyster. Once fertilization occurs, the zygote begins to divide and develop rapidly. Thirdly, larva stages. The first larva stage is trichopher, which is it will free swimming and use cilia for movement. These stages last for a few hours to a day. The trichopher develop into average larva, which has a small, transparent shells and ciliated volume for swimming and feeding. This stage lasts for about 2 to 3 weeks. As the villager larva matures, it enters the protovillager stage, characterized by the development of a foot. The foot allows the larva to explore the substrate and find a suitable habitat. Okay, next, the protovillager larva will settle into a hard substrate, such as rocks and shells. After settling, the larva undergoes metamorphosis, which usually transforming into a juvenile oyster known as a spud. We're almost done with the life cycle of oyster. Are you still with me? Okay, let me continue to explain the next cycle, which is a juvenile stage. These stages involve a significant growth and development as the oyster prepares for adulthood. Alright, last but not least, an oyster reaches sexual maturity within 1 to 3 years. As adults, oyster can produce a continuing life cycle.
Do you know oysters are important to ecosystem? Oysters are important to ecosystem for several reasons such as water filtration, habitat and biodiversity, coastal protection, nutrient cycling, last but not least, economic cultural importance. Now I will explain a few points of the oyster crucial to the ecosystem. Firstly, water filtration. Oysters are filter feeders. They extract plankton and particles from water column. Do you know that a single oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of water per day, improving water clarity and quality? Next, nutrient cycling. Oysters play a role by consuming organic matter and recycling nutrients within the ecosystem. This contributes to productivity of estuarine and coastal waters. Oyster is not just important to ecosystem, it also important to our economy, such as commercial fisheries, tourism and recreation, ecosystem services, employment and income, export and trade, lastly cultural and culinary significance. You must be wondering about those points. Let me explain. First, for commercial fisheries, oysters support a significant seafood industries through commercial harvesting and aquaculture. They are cultivated in coastal areas worldwide, providing jobs and income for fishermen, aquaculturists, and associated industries. Next, for export and trade. Basically, oysters are traded internationally, contributing to global seafood markets. Countries with substantial oyster production and export include the United States, China, France, and Japan. Now, let's move to the special parts about oyster. I want to tell you the interesting information about the oyster. Do you know that oyster produce pearl? Not all oyster produce pearls. These some species, particularly certain types of freshwater mussels, are known for producing pearls as a result of an irritant inside their shell. Natural pearls have been prized for jewelry for centuries. Other than pearl formation, it also could be culinary diversity. So basically, oysters are enjoyed worldwide and prepared in numerous ways. They can be consumed raw on the half shell, cooked in various dishes such as stews or fried, or used as an ingredient in sauces and other recipes.